One of the joys of a symphony concert is that you can be metaphorically transported to many locations without ever leaving your seat. Music of different cultures and different eras can coexist in a symphony concert, creating an aural mental travelogue. That's definitely the case in these concerts by the Atlanta Symphony, as Robert Spano guides us through Paris in the early days of the 20th century, our own decade here in Atlanta, and will end up in Vienna, circa 1808. It all starts as our phenomenal principal clarinetist Laura Ardan offers the Rhapsody for Clarinet and Orchestra by Claude Debussy. In a French restaurant, this might be called an amuse-bouche, one of those perfectly formed appetizers offered by the chef himself. This short work, written in 1910 for clarinet students at the Paris Conservatory, was an examination piece they all had to play to move on in their studies. Now, this could have been one of those dry as dust academic exercises, but in Debussy's hands, this miniature is exquisite from beginning to end. You'll immediately recognize the composer's trademark misty, evocative tone choices that alternate with energetic, virtuoso passages. In his 14 seasons thus far as our music director, Robert Spano has championed the works of many living composers. They've mostly been Americans, with some noteworthy exceptions, such as the Argentine Osvaldo Golijov, and more recently, the English-born Richard Pryor. Mr. Pryor now makes his home here in Atlanta and is the director of orchestra studies at Emory University. Last season, we commissioned Richard, and he gave us a wonderful tone poem called Of Shadow and Light, Incantations for Orchestra. This week, we offer his Symphony No. 3, written in 2011. It's a big, bold, ambitious piece in 3 movements. The moods alternate throughout between an almost hypnotic beauty and music of great vigor and excitement. And speaking of vigor and excitement, we will end these concerts with Beethoven's Fifth. Since its first performance at Christmas time in Vienna in 1808, the Beethoven Fifth Symphony has become much more than a symphony. It's been transformed into a cultural icon, like the Mona Lisa or the Parthenon. So, how do we keep a fresh attitude towards this symphony which has been weighed down with so many extra musical expectations? Orchestra players and conductors have the greater challenge, since there are over 150 recordings of the Beethoven Fifth to influence their interpretations. One way for us as listeners to remember that this piece was not created by Beethoven in a single stroke of genius. He worked at it off and on for over 3 years. If you're old enough to remember Leonard Bernstein's magnificent television program on this piece from the early 1950s, you'll recall those great photographs of Beethoven's countless sketches for the first movement alone. Struggle and triumph are part of this creation. It's a metaphor we can all relate to, since struggle will always be with us, and triumph is something to which we all aspire. I also like to remember the words of a wise colleague of mine several years ago, when someone was complaining that the Beethoven Fifth was programmed far too often by orchestras just to fill the house. He replied that we can never forget that someone in this audience will be hearing the Beethoven Fifth for the first time. Maybe this week, that will be you. We all need and deserve these life-changing experiences.